Keith Urban, the soul Nicole Kidman has held through chaos and calm, now faces the most brutal health crisis of his life. A turn that's shaken their quiet world and ours. Can love that refused a wedding ring, yet rewrote what devotion looks like, carry them through this unthinkable chapter. The morning that news like this seeps into the world doesn't arrive with trumpets. It arrives with hush. A driver idles a little longer by the curb. A studio postpones a table read with a polite note that says nothing and everything. Someone at a cafe recognizes her, the black coat, the pale profile, the careful sunglasses, and chooses not to ask for a photo. For weeks now, those close to the couple say schedules have become softer, flexible in only one direction, toward home. You can almost hear it in the way Nicole's footsteps sound on the hardwood when she crosses to the kitchen. Softer, unhurried. The kettle set down as if sound itself could bruise. There are reports of Keith canceling private commitments first. A studio day he promised to a friend. A surprise drop-in at a small Nashville room he loves because the ceiling is low and the audience breathes like one body. There are whispers of late-night drives down side streets to avoid the bigger roads. The ones where a single picture could become a story that doesn't belong to them. You do what you must when life narrows to the size of a hand you can hold. A breath you can count. Projects shift. A prestige role that would have demanded 3 countries in 5 months is quietly delayed. Another hears, not now, and understands. In a house that usually floats on music and marked-up scripts, the center of gravity has moved to the sofa, to a warm throw, to the way the afternoon light hits the mantel at 3:17 p.m., to the gentle knock before entering. The studio where a guitar leans like a loyal dog waiting at the door. But what shaped a life strong enough to face this? Nicole's beginning reads like a postcard with the edges thumbed soft by time. Honolulu first breath, Sydney babyhood, the scent of eucalyptus outside school windows, the hum of planes lifting and landing like promises. Her parents taught a specific kind of ambition, not the sparkle-chasing kind, the other kind, the one that says work is the respect you pay your gift. She was the tall girl who felt taller than the room, the pale kid who learned to watch before she spoke. In church halls and community centers, she found the quiet chair by the exit and mapped the adults. Who told the truth? Who performed it? A first wound arrived like so many do. The ordinary ache of being out of step with the age you're in. The tongue that tripped over words when feelings were too big for the sentence. She learned to count breaths backstage. 5 in, 5 out. While a second-hand coat swallowed her shoulders whole and a borrowed lipstick gave her courage in a mirror that wobbled. What saved her wasn't a thunderclap. It was a small, precise gift. A teacher, one of those stubborn angels every life needs, placed a stapled script in her hands and said, "You don't have to be yourself for 22 pages." The paper smelled like toner and coffee. She traced the title with a fingernail and felt something unhook inside. At home, she read the lines aloud with a hairbrush as a microphone, pacing between a couch with a spring that squeaked and a window that showed the ocean if you stood on tiptoe. And she realized acting wasn't hiding. It was finally being seen. Rejections came in neat stacks and messy whispers. Too tall for the boy we cast, too delicate for this one, not American enough for the accent we want, not Australian enough for the cliché we're selling. Odd jobs paid phone bills and acting classes. Ushering in theaters where she mouthed the monologues from the back row. Handing out flyers under a sun that bleached everything flat. Walking home with blistered heels and a head full of lines. A near break fizzled when a promised call became a polite silence. Another almost arrived wearing a producer's grin and a contract that would have pinned her to a version of herself that didn't fit. She took tiny parts and built them like cathedrals, one truthful moment at a time. But here's where it gets complicated. You can do everything right. The accent work, the posture, the breath, the study of hands and eyes, and still watch doors swing shut. She learned to slip sideways, to reinvent the silhouette. There was a C-thriller, lean, tense, the kind of part that turns a face into a map you can't stop reading. There was a director who loved rhythm, who spoke not only about dialogue, but about the measure between syllables. There was a decision to stop competing with the version of her that rooms seemed to want, and to offer the version that told the truth instead. A partnership sharpened what was raw. The choice to let stillness carry a scene. The willingness to let imperfection crack the lacquer and let the person shine through. You could feel it in the way she learned to leave air in the line, to trust the camera would find the thought before the word. Then success arrived the way it often does. Too loud, too bright, and slightly off-key. Suddenly, the world decided what she was. The porcelain star, the red carpet myth, the icy blonde with eyes like winter glass. The image was addictive in the way sugar is. It spiked and crashed and left you hollow. She won what people call breakthroughs. those career seismic shifts that set a path in stone, and discovered that stone is heavy to drag behind you. Was she the person in the poster or the woman who preferred a quiet kitchen table at midnight with a script and a pencil? Identity versus role. Who gets to choose? A public triumph, an award, a nightlit gold, a speech where her voice shook once and only once, deepened a private fracture she didn't perform for anyone. The sense that the more the world looked, the less it saw. You could spot it if you looked carefully, in the way she touched a ring and then moved her hand away, in the way her smile always landed half a second after her eyes. Fame is a crowd with a megaphone. Home is a hand on your back when you're not looking, and finding the second would change everything. He entered not like a plot twist, but like a steady drum you notice only when it stops. Keith Urban guitar pick in his pocket, a laugh with edges sanded by gratitude, the kind of gentleness that feels like competence rather than performance. Love in their house look like ordinary devotion, a mug placed where the other person likes it, a note tucked against a metronome, a jacket lifted quietly from a sleeping shoulder at 2 a.m. so the person sleeping doesn't wake cold. They built a life that walked past the clatter. There was the wedding that felt smaller than the headlines it created because what mattered lived in the vows, only they heard in the back of their throats. There were daughters whose artwork magnetized to the refrigerator like a private museum of joy. There were mornings when the dog's paws clicked on the floorboards and afternoons when guitar strings sounded like sun and wood. She made choices the world labeled surprising, turning down brilliant parts because the time didn't align with the season their family was in, asking to shoot closer to home, reading scripts with a watch on the table, and a rule: no role that demanded the cost of missing essential days. Insiders say there were offers with numbers that looked like phone numbers. Maybe, she said, not this one, not now. And the world said, unthinkable. And the people at her table said, wise. He learned the cadence of her work, the way she disappears into a role without leaving the room, and she learned the cadence of his. Tour buses and green rooms and the holy hush before a first chord at a sold-out show. In a world that rewards spectacle, they chose a quieter and that's when everything changed. The blow does not always announce itself. Sometimes it arrives on a Tuesday at 4:02 p.m. when the studio lights are off, and the house is filled with a kind of listening silence. Reports speak of a diagnosis, the kind that reduces a calendar to one day at a time. Not clinical words, never those, but the human ones. Tired, more tired than usual. A hand that rubs the bridge of the nose. A gaze that lingers an extra second on nothing in particular. There are pictures of him in hats he's always loved, but now they seem to sit lower on his brow as if he's shielding himself from more than the sun. There's the familiar guitar on its stand, a pick wedged into the strings at the 12th fret, a bookmark in a song paused mid-time which used to stretch like a road shrinks to the size of a room. He cancels first quietly and then publicly, and the feed fills with kindnesses and questions and inevitably noise. Nicole moves like a woman who knows exactly where she's going and why. She looks at the calendar and removes more than she adds. The world continues to offer, it always does, and she continues to measure every ask against the one answer that matters. Here we are, here facing times. Arrow means choosing how to spend the hours. You can count with your fingers and feel with your face. So they return to first principles. The resilience she learnt as a girl who grew too tall for her skin becomes a reservoir. She writes letters by hand because ink slows thought enough to be honest. She takes walks that follow the same route, left at the lilac bush, right at the mailbox with the dent because ritual eases the mind. At the kitchen table where she once mapped a character's arc with a pencil and a ruler, she now maps meals and medications and the soft architecture of days that hold. He practices not to perform, but to feel the strings under his fingers, to remind his hands who they've always been. The dog adopts a new schedule, guarding the door between rooms as if love could be kept in and pain kept out by 4 careful paws. What endures when